Frequency Podcast Network. Stories that matter, podcasts that resonate.
The race to replace Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is set to kick into high gear this week, with some heavy-hitter candidates expected to launch their bids or maybe even take their names out of the running. So far, we have two declared candidates, former MP and businessman Frank Baylis and Ottawa MP Chandra Arya. However, we've already seen a shift in all the speculation after Finance Minister Dominic LeBlanc and Foreign Affairs Minister Mélanie Joly announced they would not be running, both of them citing the tariff threat from incoming U.S. President Donald Trump as a reason they feel they need to stay in their current roles.
I will be solely focused on the real economic threat that American tariffs represent to the Canadian economy and to Canadian workers.
I think that our chances were really, really high. But the reality is I'm foreign minister at a time that is crucial in our history.
The rules of the campaign were set by the party executive just days after Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announced his resignation. Candidates have until January 23rd to enter. They have to pay a fee of $350,000, and the new leader will be declared on March 9th. I'm Cormac Mac Sweeney, and today on The Big Story, we're looking at the quick Liberal leadership race with Greg MacEachern with Can Strategies, who previously served in multiple roles in the Liberal Party and with the Paul Martin government, including as an advisor to cabinet ministers. Greg, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure, Cormac. Good to chat.
So is this week where the rubber really hits the road for this leadership race as we get a better idea of who's in and who's out?
Yeah, I mean, to use your road analogy, you really can't start a road trip unless you know what vehicle you're taking and whether or not it's going to make it to the destination. So I think with the rules coming out, and I'm going to continue the car analogy if you permit me, it kind of rules out the tire kickers. I've seen in other years where, and not just with the Liberal Party, I was looking back at the last Conservative leadership. I saw some names that I've not heard of since. I remember in 2006 when in the race to replace Paul Martin, there were lots of people over that summer that, appeared at leadership events, but didn't really, push it much further than that. There's a really short turnaround period here. It is crunch time. And, with the criteria of what you need to do to get into the race, what whether or not your vehicle is ready to complete the trip. And so I think we're going to start to see some people that are in. And I think we're going to start to see, as we saw with Dominic LeBlanc and Mélanie Joly, not necessarily because of the rules, but because of, events, your boy events, who's in and who's out.
And at the time of recording this on Friday, we're expecting former Bank of Canada Governor Mark Carney to enter the race this week. We could get decisions from Innovation Minister François-Philippe Champagne, House Leader Karina Gould, and Natural Resources Minister Jonathan Wilkinson. Reports say former BC Premier Christy Clark is ready to go, and former Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland is among a long list of people still considering. But how important is it to jump in early? Sometimes it's good to get out of the gate fast to try and build support, but does that really matter in a short race with the entry deadline just around the corner on January 23rd?
Yeah, there's not going to be a lot of time for on-the-job learning with whoever takes the role as Liberal leader. You really have to hit the ground running. So in the past, when I was alluding to people that had put their names forward that didn't eventually, run or pursue it, that far, there were other reasons for doing that. Increase your profile. Perhaps you want to run for local office and you think this is going to help you. I'm not sure that ever actually works. And it often comes along with a big price tag. And we've seen some people struggle to pay their leadership debts. So I think with a really, really short window here, there's not a lot of time for anyone that doesn't really seem serious, significant, and ready to lead the Liberal Party.
And you talk about money. I mean, that entrance fee is steep, $350,000. How will that impact who decides to run? And could this risk making it look more like a coronation, depending on who decides to toss their name in the hat?
I looked at what the price tag was the last time, which is more than a decade ago in the Liberal race, which was 75,000. This is a lot more significant than that, but I think it's more in line with more of the recent Conservative leadership races. And again, there's not a lot of time to waste here. So, to be clear, Cormac, I'm not supporting anyone. I was hoping to see if Dominic LeBlanc would run, but at this moment, I've not declared for anyone, and I'm kind of in a wait and see mode. But in my view, my lens is communications, party stakeholders, things like that. I'm not a political fundraiser, but that price tag suggests to me that if you want to have a serious bid at this, you better have a fundraising team in place already so you can secure that seat.
But Greg, if the field is too small, is there a risk of the Liberals dealing with the perception of a coronation, much like the Democrats did in the U.S. election? Or does that comparison not really make sense because there's an actual race taking place here?
Look, I want to be really fair here, and I want to be a reasonable partisan. That is a possibility, but not just because of the fee. We have to be realistic about where things are. Justin Trudeau, prior to Christmas, I think caucus had kind of really been upset with the cabinet shuffle and how Minister Freeland was treated. So we're in a situation where the time crunch means that if you're really cynical, you can view this as a coronation. But the flip side of that is you're also looking at people who are serious contenders. Part of that is going to be financial, your ability to fundraise. But part of that is going to be your ability to seize the hearts and minds of Liberal supporters who are going to vote in this race. So no matter what, whether it's the finances or the time period, Cormac, there is the danger of that because it's such a short period of time, those who are really ready to go are going to have the best chance. And that's because of the situation the Liberal Party is in. This is not, as if we just lost an election and the leader who lost the election wants to step down. This is a really odd thing. We don't really have a lot of precedents in Canadian politics for this. So it's not just the financials that have put the Liberal Party in this position.
When you look at the field and the choice Liberals have to make here, how key is it going to be for the next leader to potentially be considered an outsider or somebody not as closely linked to outgoing Prime Minister Justin Trudeau?
Yeah, this is where communication skills are going to play a key role because, the old cliche, is it a feature or a bug? It depends on how you promote it. I mean, there are people that are very critical of, say, career politicians. But, the other side of that is, well, what happens when you bring in someone that doesn't have any experience in politics? And we can find, some examples of that where people have come into politics and they didn't have a huge background with it. Michael Ignatieff would come to mind. So, you have that, and you look at the first year of Mr. Ignatieff's leadership, and he had, the people that helped him win the leadership around him. And then as things were not going well, he had to make some big changes. So, you can use that as an example where, well, perhaps somebody with political experience would have been helpful. Cormac, basically what I'm saying is it's in the eye of the beholder. One person's political experience is someone else's political baggage. And again, you've got to have a strong campaign ready to promote, whatever you think of the assets of your candidate, in that way. But the lesson, I think, in Canadian politics is, you've got to be really prepared to define yourself quickly before others define you. The Conservatives were really good at defining Stéphane Dion and Michael Ignatieff. It was tougher to define Justin Trudeau because for a couple of generations of Canadians, he was a known entity, born to a sitting prime minister in 1971. There was a bit of a conceit, we revealed in Justin Trudeau's interview with Nathaniel Erskine Smith, where he said the ads didn't work on me, and that's why we didn't run them about the Conservative leader. Well, Justin Trudeau had an entire life prior to being in politics for people, so a good segment of Canadians were familiar with him. So whatever that is, whether it's a positive or negative, can often be how quickly you are to get out there first.
You've been in politics a long time. Take us behind the scenes. What conversations might be happening between leadership hopefuls and their teams right now? Are there conversations being had between the contenders themselves? And what are these candidates saying to MPs and party members to try and secure their support?
Right. Well, there'd be a couple of buckets. One of the buckets would be fundraising. How quickly can we fundraise? What can we do? There'd be probably another group of people that are tasked with what policies do you want to have ready to quickly put in the window that are going to differentiate you from other candidates. Another conversation is going to be who are the organizers that you can seek out and tap. So, we talk about influencers now in terms of social media. Well, influencers in terms of political parties that existed forever. So what happens is that, I've gotten calls from people that, I worked in politics with, on the Hill here or, back in Nova Scotia. And people will have questions for you. What is this person like? Do you think this person's going to run? Well, if you can find some people who are really good at having large groups of networks, and there are some people that's all they want to do in politics. They want to work in elections. They want to work on leadership. Their area isn't policy. It isn't fundraising. It isn't communication. It's organized. And I remember when I moved to Ottawa to work for Paul Martin and meeting different people. And, you would ask somebody, who's that person? What's their role? And they said that person can get 400 people in a room by the snap of a finger. So that person is extremely helpful for leadership or, say, campaign events. So there's a whole other skill set that emerges as important during leadership, especially in terms of who can you quickly get the message out to, and then they can kind of pass it on to their networks, almost like a strata.
So, Greg, what are some of the rules or factors to this race that maybe haven't been revealed yet that could make a difference to how this all plays out?
Good question, Cormac. And again, as we're chatting, the rules are just kind of freshly out. I did notice that because we were in the supporter category, we had the supporter category in the Liberal Party for a while. I wondered about this. But one of the items says that you cannot be a member of another federal party. That's not uncommon. But again, prior to the existence of the supporter category, that was pretty much a standard thing. So that's something I'm kind of looking at. I can't think of anything else offhand on that, but there are issues that often emerge. 10 years ago or so, when we would have been talking about the Liberal leadership, we would not have been dealing with the specter of foreign interference, for example. And that's something that is very clearly present in the conversations right now.
We still don't have details as well about the cap, the spending cap for candidates, how much they'll be allowed to spend. Over a decade ago, they were allowed to spend up to $950,000. So we'll wait to see how much they're going to be allowed to spend in this one. Debates, location of the announcement, will those things potentially play a factor in how this shakes out?
Yeah, and you can often, this is often where you'll see party infighting come out, where people are concerned. They think that, that there's a bias to this region or in another. And in terms of the spending cap, I would really encourage candidates in their camps to watch that, because we all, we don't have to look very far, and it's, in not just one political party, but people that are unable to pay their debt because of the rules. You cannot be, a wealthy individual. Kevin O'Leary comes to mind, where just because you're a wealthy individual doesn't mean you get to run and write, one personal check to cover everything. That is not the way the rules work. So people need to be very mindful that they're not going to be overspending. And, just to go historically quickly for a second, Cormac, in 1976, when Brian Mulroney ran for the PC leadership, there was a perception that he had a very high spending campaign. and it worked against him. And when he ran in 1983 successfully, they were a lot more mindful of that. We got to remember right now we're still coming out of the effect of high inflation, the effect of the pandemic on our economy. And I would say that if you're a candidate that seems to be very free spending at a time like this, when a lot of Liberals are saying it's time to kind of shut off the taps a bit, the Blue Liberals are getting a bit louder on that. That would be something I'd really want. If I was advising a candidate, something to be very mindful of.
How difficult will it be for the party to run this leadership campaign at the same time as it's trying to prepare for a general election that could come shortly after Parliament resumes on March 24th?
Yeah, I mean, who put them in this situation anyway? It's not easy, but this is the price of being in power. This is the price of winning 3 elections in a row and wanting to continue and have success. I mean, there are 2 arguments around whether or not the polls have been so bad so long. Our Canadians have a baked in viewpoint of who they want to support, or will a new leader change that? But regardless, the Liberals have to be able to get through this leadership and be prepared for the next election. And one of the things that really ticked Liberals off was the lack of preparedness, it seemed, for a couple of the by-elections, and the by-elections where Liberals normally win or did extremely well. And so, even a week ago, I was hearing from people in Nova Scotia concerned that not a lot had been done to prepare for the Halifax by-election, where the former member of Parliament, Annie Fillmore, resigned to run successfully for mayor of Halifax. So there is a job for the party to do. I give full marks to the executive. They had to meet quickly, come up with some rules. They got some feedback from caucus, not all of it positive, change some things, address the foreign interference concern, I think. But now you've also got to do these things in tandem. And so you may be relying on, maybe not everyone wants to get involved in the leadership. And perhaps you want to tap into those people to help you do both the convention and the leadership choice and prepare for the next election, which could be very soon.
Greg, can the party actually win with a new leader, or is this next leader just going to be basically a placeholder position until the party loses the next election, given the low polling numbers we're seeing right now?
Cormac, that's a question where I am scared if I answer what I think, which is elections matter. Lots of things can happen before then. And, before then, the reality is that, you see the polls for what they are. I don't have, like an internal view of where preparations are. And, another concern that I would kind of flag is the fact that there may be current MPs that are considered to be running again, but have changed their minds and are not. So that adds to it as well. That means more riding nominations still have to go. It's a tough thing to do. How do you tell somebody to come and join a party and we have a 2-election scenario? We're not going to win the next election, but stay with us. You really have to be positive in order to bring people in. Lots of things can happen, but you also have to look, at the reality of what public opinion polling has been showing for about a year.
If this new leader doesn't win the next general election, they may be responsible for a rebuild of the Liberals. So does someone like a Mark Carney or a Christy Clark or even a Chrystia Freeland, do you see them, eating chicken dinners at Kiwanis Club meet and greets to do the legwork that it will take to try and build the party back up if they're not successful in the next election?
You say those chicken dinners like they're a bad thing, Cormac. Yeah, that's a good question. Up until Stéphane Dion, it would have been pretty certain that a Liberal leader would have gotten 2 kicks at the can. For example, the last Liberal leader that had that was John Turner, 84 and 88. Mr. Ignatieff lost his seat in 2011, so that probably influenced it. But I think it's a case-by-case basis. I mean, the difference between 1984 and 88 and John Turner is social media, the amount of media shrinkage, the lack of a press gallery following, to the extent that they would have in the 80s. So we have a faster kind of turnaround in judgment. So it really depends on what kind of election the person runs, on whether or not the Liberal Party at the, if they succeed and they're prime minister, we're not going to have this conversation. But if, we keep using that cliche about saving the furniture, it's not just the amount of furniture you save, it's, how did you perform during the election? And do we see something there that we can rebuild? And, as much as that's a bit probably terrifying for a lot of partisans, it's also pretty exciting. And again, this is the position that the Liberal Party is in. There's nothing you can do to change that. And, there can be conversations for a long time about why the Liberal Party is in this situation. But that's probably not as important for Liberal supporters as is having a thoughtful, strong leadership with somebody who can turn around quickly and be prepared to run an election.
Greg, thank you so much for your thoughts on this. I really appreciate it.
Always great to chat, Cormac. Thank you.
That was Greg MacEachern with Can Strategies, who previously served in multiple roles in the Liberal Party and with the Paul Martin government, including as an advisor to cabinet ministers. We were speaking about the Liberal leadership race. I'm Cormac Mac Sweeney, and that was The Big Story. You can send us feedback on this episode or on any other episode by emailing us at hello@thebigstorypodcast.ca or leave a voicemail at 416-935-5935. You can find us on the Seeker app or on all your favorite podcast players. Please rate, review, follow, and share. Thanks for listening.